knowing how they played today,
Mhm.
what would your starting 11 be? If you could go back, what would be the starting 11?
Oh man, I mean, obviously, in retrospect, it's hard. Knowing how today was going to be, I think changed as soon as the Netherlands scored, because I don't think they were going to sit back necessarily that whole game. I think they had other things to throw at us. But once we gave them that first goal, and by the way, the second goal was the exact same. And if you watched Frankie de Jong, he sat in that pocket every time that we got down to the touchline to cut that ball out, and we never cut that ball out. It was like they found this space of saying, there is goals here for us, and they did the exact same thing. Anyways, that's a different conversation. But for me, thinking about that, it's really hard, Charlie, because I didn't expect the U.S. to be that tired. Now, logically, I can see why they were this tired, because they've had to grind their way to this point in the tournament. And so I would think about fatigue within the context of that. I'd look at the fact that Gio Reyna has barely had any minutes. Brendan Aronson has barely any minutes, neither of which I thought have had a good performance today, but at least had energy, and that's a good starting point. And then outside of that, it's the number 9 that it comes down to me. I would still try to get Timo Weah up top. I know that we're saying 3. I know we brought 3 strikers. I know Gregg said to a fault he's not going to do that. But that to me was just one. It felt like the natural growth and transition without having to give something up, because we had something to put into his place. We didn't have somebody at the 9. We could continue to grow that 9 spot and then eliminate it. That Jimmy, I don't know about you, or if you can hear us right now. Jimmy, can you hear us?
I got you.
Yeah. Who would you change in your 11, knowing how the game is going to go?
That's a great question from Charlie. I'm kind of leaning towards you to put Timo Weah there, or you could have just started Gio Reyna if you thought that. Or I guess when they spoke to Gregg before the game, and I don't know if you guys saw this or not in the pregame coverage, but he said that they wanted Jesus Ferreira, Gregg said, to drop into midfield. So if you're going to have your striker that's up there, who you bring in as a striker to drop into midfield, why not just play a player that's better at playing in midfield?
Yes.
Why not have an Aronson? Why not have a Timo? Timo Weah would give us stretch it a little bit. And they were always going to sit back, and when they scored, they didn't need to really come at us anymore, and they were looking to counter. But yes, you have a Gio, you have a Brendan, but not Jesus. And I feel bad for Jesus. I think we were all hoping he would do well in his 45 minutes, or at least when he got his opportunity. And he was as invisible as he could possibly be. And every time he touched the ball, I think it was close to a turnover. And that is unfortunate, because if he wasn't going to do the job, you had a couple other guys, Ricardo Pepi and Jordy Pefok, and then, or maybe we just could have played a different formation in general. So, yeah, that's on Gregg. Charlie, not getting him ready. He hadn't played a meaningful game in a month.
Yeah, Charlie, who are you changing this? Because I've got some questions for you to follow up with this with these changes. Is that we talk about Timo Weah at the 9, but even he looked like he had a great take, but it felt like all of our attackers felt like we weren't going to get near the goal again, and they were letting the ball go from funny angles. They were rushing shots. They were like almost trying to just create something out of nothing, where in games past, it felt like we had a little bit more of that belief that we were going to get in and around the box. I mean, I'm talking about Timo Weah in this context. I'm talking about Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic a number of times too, just getting anywhere near the goal, and we're like, shoot it. And I like the idea of that in theory, but at the same time, it felt like they just had our number, and we didn't have this belief that, like, once we got close, it was like rushing to get a chance off. Like we're playing against, sometimes when we play against some of the underdog nations in World Cup qualifying, when they get in anywhere around the goal, they just let a shot fly because they don't know when they're going to get there again. Did you feel that same sort of rush or urgency, but for the wrong reasons? And who would you change in your lineup?
Well, the only reason why, for me, it was clear and obvious why you don't start Jesus Ferreira is because he wasn't coming into this confident. He wasn't banging goals. He hadn't played a competitive match in 6 weeks. He wasn't. We saw in playoff time, in the crunch time, in MLS, he was not effective. He was a non-factor in 2 games with the national team. Non-factor up until this point as of late. So you're putting him into a lineup when you could clearly take Timothy Weah, because all the other number 9 options had been used and exhausted. Haji Wright was not effective. Yes, he got this goal, but if you gave him that same ball a million times, this would be the only time he's scoring that goal.
It went over his foot towards the goal while he was running the opposite direction. It was incredible.
It was a miracle.
Listen. It had Julian Green vibes in 2014 where he scuffed it and somehow went in. Like, it just, I mean, that was obviously better technique.
Well, at least he was swinging towards the goal. Like, this was like,
this was
I'm just saying, like, in terms of like crazy lucky. Yeah, sure. No, this was even more remarkable.
This was accidental. And so I look at Timothy Weah, you play him there. He was already moving into that central position when they're in possession against England and against Iran. You saw him move in. So it's not like you're reinventing the wheel here. Yeah. And then you have Brendan Aronson. We saw pressure. His movement is not going to really take people on 1v1, but because he's so effective with his movement and his pressure, that is going to create opportunities for us. Haji Wright had a golden opportunity for a striker, and he takes a pass touch.
That was bad.
That was what? What are we talking about here? So for me, it's you're not setting the team up to start well to win this game when you put Jesus Ferreira in, and when he checks in, you're not. Virgil van Dijk was like this,
and it didn't feel, by the way, Charlie, like we were.
Coffee.
It didn't feel like we were playing that sort of a hybrid two-striker system like we had been so successful. I didn't see that connectivity with Timo Weah. And Jimmy, it brings me to my question to you around Gakpo and Depay. Sometimes they were wide, sometimes they were together, but there was this like constant presence of them everywhere. And I feel like the U.S. has very similar tools to what the Netherlands have, right? In terms of they do have some speed in transition. We do have a really strong midfield. But that connectivity that they had, it just tactically, when they got it right, I just was thinking the whole time, like, man, it doesn't matter what we do. It wasn't like Japan high pressing when we played Japan in that friendly and we just couldn't figure a way out. It just felt like they had our number and they were like one step ahead of everything. Do you think, not necessarily that we got the lineup wrong, but do you think that we got the tactics wrong within the lineup? Because I know we've talked about the lineup, but tactically, it felt like we were still a little bit disconnected.
Both.
Yeah, for me, what was always going to be a challenge for us was the fact that we were playing against two strikers for the first time in this tournament. So Wales, single striker, England, single striker, Iran, single striker. And their press and their team shape fell into that accordingly, right? Mm-hmm. In this one, they had their two strikers, and then as the game developed, they had their two strikers basically sit on our outside backs, and Davy Clausen, the 10, would come in between, and he'd actually be the first line of pressure. I saw it a number of times. So there was some fluidity in terms of how they were going to press. And obviously, when we give up the first goal, it's going to make it even more difficult for us, and it allows them to drop in even more and be more thoughtful and maybe even 5 to 10 yards deeper. And then from there, what's interesting is because we like to get our outside backs into attacking positions to be a little bit higher up the field, then when the ball did turn over, you have Gakpo or you have Depay in those wide positions. And now they can play from there. And then all of a sudden, when Gakpo comes in, Dumfries makes the run on the outside, and that's what kills us. It's
called Counter City, and they played that to perfection. That was exactly how they set up. This was a coaching masterclass. I mean, Louis van Gaal literally said, I'm going to analyze the shit out of America right now. And guess what? We're going to invite them in. We are going to counter them. We'll concede possession. They have no problem. That's why possession, I can't stand it sometimes because it's so overrated. Look at Japan. Look at what the Netherlands did to us today. They said, we're going to just be effective with the counter. We don't need many opportunities. We have class, and our guys are clinical. We're going to bet on Gakpo. We're going to bet on Memphis Depay, and it paid off. That's exactly what they did. It's not that hard.
Well, also on top of that, there was a clear methodology in terms of if you get wide, hit it hard and low back towards the penalty spot. Mm-hmm. I don't remember any balls being whipped to the.
Oh, he gone.
Jimmy just cut out just a little bit there. So apologies. Oh, sorry, Jimmy. You cut out there for 1 second.
No,
finish that thought.
Yes, because my phone's mad at me because they're pissed that the U.S. lost as well. So listen, it's just frustrating that they had a game plan and they worked it to perfection. And what really bums me out, I guess, in the first goal, Tyler Adams just watches a Memphis Depay run right past him at midfield and does something that's uncharacteristic to Tyler Adams. And so, and then there was a lack of recognition of danger, and you'd like to think that we were pretty good at that up until that point. And then all of a sudden we just have that one shutoff. We're down 1-0 and the game's over. The game's over. Then it looked a little bit like men versus boys.
I'm curious, both with your defensive experience, the back line drops on both instances when Dumfries gets down to the end line, and you're in a straight line. So Heath, if you're not marking someone, you're just marking space. But you can clearly look over your shoulder and say, man, I'm not marking anyone, and there's one runner or two runners. Don't you then say, hey, you step, or I'll go, or because it was clear on the last goal for sure, Dumfries is alone on the back post. Anthony Robinson is marking a player when Tim Ream has nobody and Walker Zimmerman has nobody. He's in the center back space. Why isn't it? Maybe it's Turner. Maybe it's Tim Ream saying, hey, go. I got this guy. What would be going through your mind in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're trying to pass somebody on, and if you're in that position, I mean, naturally, Robinson's going inside until someone's going to take him because he's the more dangerous man, and you're kind of baiting this idea. Well, if they're going to have to put in a perfect ball, it's going to have to beat all of us to the back post. Well, guess what? Didlin could put in a perfect ball, and he did exactly that. And Dumfries had nothing but time to be able to put that away and finished it with class. But those are the little tiny details